Hey, it's Mr. Leatherwood. Today we're going to subtract integers using a number line. We have a previous video subtracting using counters, but I wanted to give you all another representation that you could use, and maybe this would be a better way for you to learn. So let's try a couple. So we're going to start with 8 minus 13. And we're going to do just like we did when we were adding integers on a number line. We're going to start with 0. And then on that first number, we're going to just kind of jump over to the first number in the number line. In this case, it's a positive 8. So I'm just going to come over to positive 8. And then we're going to minus 13. Well, in this case, it's just a positive 13. So we're just subtracting 13. So we're going to the left. So the tricky part here is that we cross 0 and then continue farther down. Okay, so we went 8 spots to get to 0, and then we had to get to 13, which would be, what, 5 more spots? 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, yeah. So we're going to be at, wrong color, sorry, negative 5. The way we know that is we started at 8, we jumped from here to here was going to be 8 spots, and then we continued 5 more spots to get to negative 5, and if you add our 8 and our 5, that gives us our 13 that we got rid of. So negative 5 would be our answer. 8 minus 13 equals negative 5. Oh, got a message. All right, let's try one more time. So this time we're starting in the negative. So I'm going to put my 0, I'm going to come over here just to give us a little bit more room. So my first thing is I'm going to my first number, which is going to be a negative 10. So all I'm doing is going over, and we're going to start at negative 10. And then we're going to subtract 7. Well, we know if we're subtracting a 7, a whole number of 7, we're going to the left. We're subtracting 7. So I'm just going to go deeper into the hole. So I'm going to hop 7 more times this way. And if we do that, if we're at negative 10 and then we go farther into the hole or farther away from 0, we know that we're going to get to negative 17 as our answer. And so if we labeled this, we went 10 spots to the left, so we got to negative 10, and then we went 7 more spots into the negative, which is why we get to negative 17. So we're just using our basic principles of if we're subtracting a number, we're going to the left on the number line. If we're adding a number, we're going to the right on the number line. So far it's been pretty simple. Now we're going to get a little tricky. Okay, so now we're going to start at 0. Our first number is going to be 1, so I'm just going to hop over 1 spot. So I'm at number 1 because that's a positive 1. And then we're going to subtract a negative 2. Well, this is where it gets a little tricky. So if you subtracted a quote-unquote normal 2 or a positive 2, if I just said 1 minus 2, you would hop 2 spots to the left, right? Because we know when we're subtracting a normal 2 or a positive 2, we're going to the left. Well, this time we're going to do the inverse of that, meaning we're not just subtracting 2, we're subtracting the opposite of 2. So this is a little different. So when we're subtracting a quote-unquote normal 2, we're going to the left. Well, in this case, since we're doing the opposite, that means we're going to go to the right 2 spots. So we're actually going to go this way 2 spots. And if we do that, we know if we're at 1 and we go to the right 2 more spots, that we're going to get to 3. So this is where it gets a little confusing because we started at 1. We normally think of subtraction going to the left, but since we're doing its opposite, right? This is an opposite or a negative of that 2. We're going to go in the opposite direction, which gets us to 3. All right, let's try one more because that's where it gets a little tricky. All right, so on this one, why don't you try to do it? This one's like the trickiest of tricky because we start in the negative And then we're subtracting a negative, or subtracting the opposite of 7. And see how you do. I'll come back and show you how to do it. All right, let's take a look. So again, I'm going to start at 0. Always start my number line problems at 0. And then I just travel to that first number. So since we're going to -10, I'm just going to hop this way because I know it's negative. So I'm going to go this way, and that gets me to -10. Okay? Then I'm going to subtract -7, or I'm going to subtract the opposite of 7. Well, if it was 7, if I just said -10 minus 7, I know, okay, well, I'm subtracting 7. I'm going to go farther into the hole. I'm going to get farther away from 0. But in this case, I'm subtracting the opposite of 7. So I'm actually going to go in the opposite direction. So instead of going 7 to the left, I'm actually going to go 7 to the right. And I don't quite make it back to 0. And I'm going to get to the number -3 is my answer. So a -10 minus a -7 is going to get you to -3. Now I did want to kind of show you something. It's kind of a trick. Your parents will probably be yelling in the background before I got to this point. Why don't you just tell them the trick? Why don't you just tell them the trick? So you may have noticed when I'm subtracting a -7, so let me write it down here so we can write. So I had -10 minus a -7. So the trick is, when we were kids, this is how we learned it. Well, if you're subtracting a negative, or if you see it next to each other, you are actually adding. So you're just going to turn it into adding a +7. And you'll notice if I was at -10 plus 7, that would get us exactly where we got on our number line. And that's always going to work if you're subtracting a negative, because you're subtracting the opposite of that number. And you noticed on all of our examples, or our 2 examples, both times we ended up going to the right, meaning that we're adding. So this will always work. So if we had -14 minus a -10, for instance, if we did that on the number line, we would start at -14, and then normally we would say, oh, well, if we're subtracting 10, we're going to go to the left. But this time, since we're subtracting the opposite of 10, we're going to go to the right. Or you may just say, well, if I'm subtracting a negative, I know that I'm actually going to the right. So if that's the case, I can change both of these to addition signs and do -14 plus 10, which would not quite get me to 0. So my answer in that case would be -4. Okay, and we're going to practice this a ton in class. So this is just a nice introduction to how we use number lines to subtract. Again, we use counters on a previous video, so I'm trying to give you many strategies in order to get this into your noggin and have a good understanding of it. But we're going to practice in class, so don't worry too much just yet. All right, I will see you in class. Thank you.